great transition. So, as we've kind of been alluding to for the entire show, tonight's deep dive is world building. A lot of us have been world building long before knowing of the world and what it means. Imaginary worlds, universes, role playing, fantasy games, and backyards when we were kids are all acts of world building in a way. Almost everyone has done it at some point, you know. However, the merit of world building doesn't just lie in the fun imaginary games as a kid. It has significant value in adulthood and real life as well. World building serves as commentary, catharsis, escapism, acceptance, freedom. In some cases, even unconsciously, world building gives us a chance to imagine a new society and universe where we are not constrained by our own truths or our own reality, especially in more dismay times, kind of like what we're having right now. It allows you to thoroughly and creatively piece together a system, a society that serves as a counterbalance to the one that we live in, paving hope and inspiration to a world that we live in now. This is how things could be. That's kind of like what is the magic of world building in a way. We can see things the way we either want them to be or the way they shouldn't be. In the case of, like, I don't know, maybe Gotham. But this is a world where, you know, the weight of the current state is, you know, your own. This is a world where you can serve as intellectual inspiration for how you move forward to solve issues in our current society. So tonight we wanted to talk about world building, why it's important, good worlds, bad worlds, ugly worlds, all the around the world, same song, you know. But thanks, Sax. I'm glad Sax got that. But let's kick off this convo tonight with, you know, a golden question. What is world building even? Cape, what's world building to you?
World building is just establishing your universe. I listened to a podcast called Imaginary Worlds, and it's just like how that world is built, like whether it's retroactively or in the moment, but like essentially you make the laws for that universe. Like, how does gravity work? You know, like just think about all kinds of stuff like that. Like we were just talking about the Lord of the Rings, and one thing that just immediately came to my mind that I held my tongue on because we're going to be talking about this is words. I mean, like, you remember in Game of Thrones, do you speak the woman tongue? You know, stuff like that. And like J.R. Tolkien, he made his own freaking language, Elfish.
Yeah, entire languages.
And I mean, I remember Batman Beyond. What did they say? Do you guys remember? Shway, you know? And then Bruce was like, that's Schwarbage, you know? But like, there's a lot to building a world, and some people can get lost in that world, and some people just, I don't know. I think it's really, it takes a maniac to world build. You know what I mean? And
especially when it's completely something new, you know?
Yeah, Sax, I'm still learning what you like, and I added to my mental list that you like Lord of the Rings. Like what else is in Sax's world of random stuff? And like, what is world building to you?
Let's see. Like, the first thing that comes to mind for me for world building is just the word new. And that carries so much weight is because in reality, there's so much of the same old that we see and that we know. And when you come to a new world, or in the process of world building, and then I play Minecraft, so it's like I understand what it is to world build on that level. But like you said, Cape, it goes even deeper than that. Mm-hmm. When it gets to a point where there is a language system that exists for that particular place. Mm-hmm. And it's so deep. I can get philosophical with this, but I'm not going to do that.
Do it.
It's like,
this is the time. It's when
you
you are here.
When you world build, you are literally. I think the title was "I Am God." You feel what I'm saying? So
I am a god. You have to do it like Kanye.
If knowledge is power, then a god am. But from the Riddler, you know. Yeah.
Hey, I love you. You get to literally dictate everything from its landscape, from its hierarchy, from just surroundings, language, situations. You can choose whether or not your world has conflict that is similar to the conflict of which we deal with, whereas racism, all kinds of stuff. Like you can do all of that. So when I but the word new, that's the thing that comes to mind first when I hear world building. I jump into something new, and new excites me. That's what I got.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I think world building can mean a plethora of different things, right? From a new language, like you said, a new elven language, even to a completely different planet with different laws of physics and everything. So, do you guys, what is actually a quality example of world building and why? And let's start with you, Sax.
Well, we talked about it before the break. The Lord of the Rings universe, that is a great example of world building because it covers. First off, it's new. Well, newer. You know what I'm saying?
Middle Earth is completely different than Earth.
You know what I'm saying? So, and it's new. There is hierarchy. Yeah. There is the terrain, the world itself. There is several languages. So it's not just Elvish. You know what I'm saying? Like you have like dark speak. So then you have like the languages that like the creatures in Mordor speak, the dwarven languages. You know what I'm saying? You have so much stuff to go off of. And I believe they do a great job of that because you get caught in it. Incubus, I'm looking over here in the comments. It says world building is about immersion, giving your audience enough to believe that they've escaped to another place. And I 100% agree with that. When I watch something like The Lord of the Rings, it allows me to exist in that plane of existence. I'm just going to call it a plane of existence for some amount of time. And that's really cool. Even when it comes to stuff like video games, like if you play like Phantasy Star Online, like if you play Sea of Thieves, like if you play anything that's like something new and exciting, you can get caught in that world and you'd be like, oh my God, I've spent hours doing this. Like The Sims. You can do that in The Sims.
I think games are one of the great examples of that because I think that video games are literally built worlds when you think about it, coded, and everything in a way, right? And so it's so easy to get locked up in them. Like, I think honestly, I get more emotional reaction from some game stories than I even have from some movies, right? Like, I think that's definitely going to be one of the big futures of, storytelling, which we've all talked. I think we've even had a whole deep dive on that before. But Kate, same question to you. What do you think is a great example of some good quality world building? One that maybe you even gravitate towards?
Well, I think a good quality of world building is just like having a grounding of reality, but at the same time, congrats, Todd, on this. This is like a really good topic because also great image too. But no, it's like I was just now thinking about like the reason I like short films and making them. It's hard to really make one because before you like pilot episodes and first appearances, because everything you have to like see the bricks being laid. And the hardest part of my first short film was having exposition and stuff like that. Like having a guy say, hey, remember that time in Mrs. Applegate's class that we were, and then you're like, oh, they're friends. But like having stuff like the Twilight Zone episode where, have you guys ever seen that one where the woman was wearing the wrap around her head and all that? Have you all seen that?
Yeah, where they take the wrap off. You're talking about the old. Yeah.
And then they show that weird, like, there's this woman, she's like, has wraps around her face. Spoilers to anyone, and we're probably going to do a spoiler show. Spoilers. But like, this was like in the 50s.
This is in
60s.
Black and white, guys. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, it was in black and white, and she was wearing a head, like wrapping around her head, and you're like, oh no, what's wrong with her? She takes off her little thing, her bandages, and she's just a normal person. And then you're like, what? Nothing's wrong with her. She's just a young lady. And then you look at everyone else, and they had. You remember those pig noses, Jake?
Yeah. They all have pig noses, and so everybody thinks she's hideous. And
it's also like a mystery in a way. Like,
but it built a world really quickly. I get what you're saying in a way. Is that like that's the interesting thing about short films in general too, and I think that's what makes a really good short is when you derive your own feelings out of that world whenever it's literally just like a few minutes maybe
and
that's something we have to do with video games a lot too is kind of like I don't want to say fill in the blanks but basically like make our own assumptions if you will about those worlds.
And I think something too like that just was going in the note of is respecting the source. Sometimes like when someone passes or something like that, like they're you gotta respect where it came from, and like sometimes they don't do that. I hate saying they because they could be anybody, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
Respect the source you got from. Like, are they going to respect, the Tolkien universe? I'm not invested in that universe yet, but still.
No, I mean, and that's a good transition to the next question I've got for you guys too, which is that world building can be a huge challenge creatively. Sometimes folks just miss the mark. I mean, we're all human. We've all had shit ideas. But what are some of the worst examples of world building? Like anyone just completely miss the mark and just build, I don't want to say a place we wouldn't want to live, because there's plenty of those that we wouldn't want to live in. Like I said, Gotham earlier. I don't think anybody here would want to live in Gotham, but that's still not a shit world. That's actually really good world building because it makes us know we don't want to live in Gotham,
Yeah.
And so but what are some just I think like some of the worst worlds you've ever been in a way, And we'll start with Cape.
Oh man, that's tough. I was about to say maybe Mississippi, and then after that, fantasy. Sorry.
I did live in Mississippi for a little while. I can't attest. But anyway.
I know. I think, even it's like pizza, even so bad, it's so good, But, like good and bad world building is just like, I don't know.
Can we hear Dot on the stream?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, sorry, we could hear Dot. What were you saying, Kip?
No, that was just, I lost my train of thought. But no, I think bad world building still paves the way for good world building. Just because but probably not just being thorough. That's plain and simple, But at the same time, you need bad worlds to, you know what I mean? Just have good worlds in general, just because it paves the way.
I get what you're saying. It's good to see an example of what a shitty world would be like. That's why we know that there's good world building, right? And so Savage Patch, great example with Jupiter's Legacy. Like I said jokingly at the beginning of the stream, I mean it kind of jokingly. If you've started Jupiter's Legacy, you can finish it if that's what you're into. If you're a finisher, right? Like if you're one of those that just has to finish things. But if you're not, you can stop. It's not a good world. They did not build a good one on that one. And so, I think that is a really good example. But Sax, for you, what are some worlds that you may have just, you went in? Yeah. Do you remember the meme from the guy from Cat Dog where he opens the door and then just nopes back out? You know what I mean? Like he walks in and then walks right back out or whatever.
Just a hat, man.
Yeah. I guess what would be a world where you did that move? Where you just open the door and we're like, what's behind this door? Fuck that. All right, I'm leaving.
Any world that is akin to just regular Earth, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because like I said, for me, the word that comes to mind when I think of world building is new. So if it's just Earth, it's kind of like, okay. So for instance, my favorite
CSI Miami.
Yeah, my favorite fighting game franchise is Mortal Kombat. So the most boring part about that game is Earthrealm. Because it's Earth. You feel what I'm saying?
It's just the Earth, yeah.
It's just Earth. But when you get to Outworld, that's fantastic. When you get to that's wonderful. Netherrealm, that's fantastic. Outer World, Order World, you know what I'm saying? You get those things. Chaos Realm, that's where you have the new stuff. But when you haven't done anything and you just have plain old Earth or something that is akin to Earth, where okay, so if you look at the DC universe, where those are not real places, Metropolis, Bloodhaven.
What?
Right? They're not real. Gotham City, all of these places, I feel like Gotham City is like Southside Chicago. I feel like Metropolis is like New York City. You know what I'm saying? It's these are places that actually exist. Yeah. So if you haven't taken the time for me, to actually make something new, it's kind of not a good world for me. Even dystopian worlds are cool to me if they're done right, because it's there's a reason that they're dystopia. So that's for me. That's how you miss the mark for me, when you just do something that's the normal.
Just plain Jane. Calling it in almost. I feel like if you're building it, I don't want to say there's bad worlds built off of just normal Earth, because obviously there are some good ones,
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, I get what you mean, because it almost feels lazy. We live here too. Yeah, I get it. Fucking car is cool. So
right? No, for real.
there's just so many things that we could do. But, world building allows us to, communicate with others and connect with others. It exists in role-playing games, card games. It exists in friend groups and clubs and fan forums. And it's a big part of what really ties us all together when you think about it and makes us all kind of like, oh, you love that show too? Why do you love it? Like, I'm a big fan of like the Harmon universe, for instance, right? Like, anything Rick and Morty, Community, all that stuff. Like if Dan Harmon made it, I like it because it's a cool world, I believe. And so you can connect with people who like similar things. And so have either of you ever been able to connect to someone immediately just based off of another world? Sax, we'll start with you. And I'm not going to answer it for you, but one thing that comes to mind, especially with you, is how much I know multiple people in our friend group enjoy fucking Mass Effect.
So that I can use that. I can use a multitude of things, but it's cool when you have a common interest in something that's make believe and something that's doesn't exist, something that takes your mind somewhere else, and you find someone else that shares that same type of vibe, and it's like, oh, you watch that? I watch that. Are you at such and such yet? Yeah, I'm there. Yo, what did you think of? And there's your conversation. There it starts. Because us as humans, like the way that we connect is through communication, and the way a relationship is established and upheld is through communication. So fictional worlds and world building definitely brings people together. Like, okay, you all, for instance, I've known you all for a little under a year, but there were some commonalities and a lot in situations and places and things that didn't really exist. And I'm sitting on your show right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is where we are. And like, so 100%, like I can fall in line with somebody that's, down for something. Now, if I find out later on they're like an axe murderer, then I might have to adjust the relationship a little bit. But
I think it's just one of those where like, we can create these huge kind of like links with other people based off of who we are in the real world, obviously, right? Like, it's just, either we were all born, like for me and Kate, we're both from Alabama. So like there's a commonality, right? Like, that's in our modern world or in our actual reality, whatever. And so, but I think what's interesting about like the whole, aspect of world building is that you can automatically know if someone's chill just based off of like, if they like a certain world that you do too sometimes. Right. And so, like, Kate, is there any one of them that, like, if you hear that somebody's a fan of X, you're automatically like, that's probably a cool person. Now, granted, yeah, they could be an axe murderer, or an axe murderer, like you said, Sax. Like, we don't always know everybody, right? That's going to be something you come out later.
I mean, axe murderers, they're pretty cool.
But are juggalos, you know what I mean? But like, is there any, I guess, world that, if you had to pack your bags and somebody else was on that train, you're both like, oh, fuck, you're going to so-and-so? Let's be best friends.
I'll probably tell you that in the top Zen, but like, I think that, something that I do without even trying, I don't know how, is I remember people's taste. I may not see you for a while, and I still remember what you like, and I know what's in the middle of the Venn diagram for both of us. And I think it's interesting to shoot back to last week's conversation, though, is to find out what their canon is. Because, like, in Gotham, the show, it was great. And from a production standpoint, it was amazing to me because you could pick up any item ever and you could go, hey, this would belong in Gotham. Then you pick up something else. This doesn't belong in Gotham. But, like, they built that Gotham so interestingly. Like, they had flip phones, but they drove 90s cars, or they used a rotary phone, It was just an interesting world because you could pick up anything and you would know, hey, would it fit on the show?
I constantly was always actually pretty confused. I was like, when is this?
Exactly, because they modify stuff on purpose, but
it fit.
I think that is very interesting, though. It's like how people see that world because everyone has their own headcanon. And it's kind of cool of what people say accepted as their own headcanon, even if they're like large fans, not large fans, stuff like that. And like, you can never know fully about anything. And just like the Gotham that I know is built different than your Gotham, like it's kind of cool to kind of find that middle ground. And then like, usually when people have their first introduction to the world is usually what really, left an imprint the most, in my opinion.
Awesome. So, and kind of in that same vein, and, world builders give creators power and voice. And in societies which constantly strive, to stifle the voices of the marginalized, that voice is important and underestimated. With our worlds, we find ourselves, our identities, and our voice in a place where nobody, not even societal oppressors, can quiet or silence us. Within our worlds, there is no danger of having or agency, in our lives kind of like taken from us. So they're ours. We built these worlds, or we like to live in them, or anything like that, especially if it's a video game or anything like that. But, in your opinion, how important has world building become to inclusion and representation in pop culture? We'll start with Kate.
Inclusion in pop culture, just as a whole, I don't know, it can sometimes echo what's going on at that time. Planet of the Apes probably spoke a lot about something of the time. That's something that's interesting too, is when something is made, how it may speak something at that time.
It could be like a commentary on society at that point.
Yeah, how,
in a
to us,
world.
outsider looking in, we're like, oh, that's cool, but it's very interesting how those worlds try to say something at that time. I can't really name any examples off the top of my head, but you guys definitely understand what I mean. We're going to see masks and stuff, and we're going to be like, well, back in in 2020, we wore masks.
When you go back and watch episodes of shows that were filmed during this time, that is going to be one of the telltale signs, that it was filmed during this time. But Sax, what do you think about the importance of world building when it comes to representation, and especially in pop culture? Important to build these worlds that help include us. I feel like it's important to build inclusive worlds because it helps lead to a more inclusive world. And so,
again, without being philosophical, and you already touched on a little bit of it, it's incredibly important because reality can be really hard. And you can be surrounded by non-like-minded people and not feel like you have a voice, not feel like you belong, and feel awkward and strange. But then someone comes along and builds a world, and it's a world that you enjoy, and it's a world where the citizens in said world, or the populace, or a sect of people have the same type of interests or issues that you may have. So you relate to that. And you lock onto that, and you hold to that. And if you find a group of people, this actually goes back to the earlier question about being able to connect with somebody based off of a world. This is how people can become one with themselves, because world building introduces a place where problems people don't really get to talk about have an open place to talk about. Let's talk about 15 years ago. There are certain things that people talk about openly now that they wouldn't talk about 15 years ago. And that's heavily in part to world building to allow people to express themselves. You feel what I'm saying? Which is a very, very good thing. And I find that it's very important also with the times. Look at the movies, everything from 2002 to about now. If you look at anything that has anything to do with the military, or anybody who had anything to do with the military, you're talking about the Iraq War. You feel what I'm saying? So that's it. Even in a fictional setting, people still talking about that. It's important. I feel like it's almost necessary, because if people didn't have a place to escape to, and they just had to deal with this all the time, they would go insane. People have gone insane and made these worlds.
Sometimes you can see the writers shine through, like Grey's Anatomy. I don't really watch it that much. They have great music though. I can't believe it's still on air, but sometimes you can see when the writer's writing in a way, you know what I mean? When they kind of make a commentary on the world, and you're like, oh, but I'm sure watching it down the line, you're going to have no idea, but still sometimes you can tell those stories that they want to drive in, it's very interesting.
No, facts. And I think that's a big part of why world building is important. Like I said, I think it's important to have, to build worlds that we kind of want to see, and that we also, want to escape into. Obviously, that's a big part of it, because our favorite worlds may not be utopias, and they rarely are. And there still may be a struggle or systematic problems, as of any world. But in our favorite worlds, we find agency and voice that we may not be able to find in real life. And I believe a lot of underlying merit of world building lies exactly in that, agency and voice. Plus escapism. Definitely can't forget about escapism. That's one of the biggest parts of world building. But any parting words on world building and what you guys really feel like the importance of it is? Let's start with you, Kate. Like, how important do you feel like it is to build a solid world?
It is very important, but I keep on echoing in my head about the ship of Thesis. If you guys know that thought experiment, where if you're on a ship and as you're on the ship and they replace each plank of wood as it gets put out, and then eventually it begs the question of, is it the same ship? Yeah, I'm glad you understand that, because is it still the same world? And like, I completely forgot about that. God said, but like, yeah, I'd still think about that of like, is it the same thing? I mean, I think it's fun, but also it's hard to keep hold of. Like, I get amazed by how much Marvel, like you said, WandaVision died, but like Marvel, they definitely have that picture of, Charlie Cox on the board from Always Sunny, where he's like, I'm talking about, of everyone.
Pepe Sylvia.
Like, how do they do that though? I don't know. Like, how do they connect the web of like, okay, at this time, let's see, Doctor Strange is here at this time and all that. Like, I wonder if they have like, oh, you want to write the movie? Here's the Bible right here for this universe. Like, this is where Doctor Strange was when Thor was right here. Like, I've always wondered that, like, is there something like that? But I think it's important, but it's also, it takes a crazy person to do it alone, probably.
Yeah. Sax, any parting words on world building?
I find that it's important. I find that it's necessary. It low key, I can't speak for anybody else. It's low key made me kind of who I am today, personality wise, because there's some great role models and examples in worlds that don't really exist, in places that are not real.
Kakashi.
Than the people that are here. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I mean that's a great example. Like, I had this long conversation with a friend before, and obviously we were a little high, but it was mostly on like, how is, I was like, is it sad that like, I like to watch, like My Hero Academia for All Might, because I'm like, that fucking guy. Like, if All Might was real, I would feel safe in that world, because like, he's here, like, I mean, obviously I don't want to give spoilers and everything because, of how the story goes, but like, if All Might in his prime was alive in this world, I lived in that world, was built in that world, I'd feel safe. Because that dude's fucking justice. And I'm like, why can't, like, like, I really do. I feel like he's like an embodiment of justice. And I'm like, I love that shit so much that they've built this world up to where, like, as a fan, I can be like, oh yeah, All Might's the embodiment of justice. Like, because they built that lore around him, where that's how we feel like that's who he is, And so that's one of my favorite things about world building. I get it, is being able to really escape and then get into it. And then, like you said, even pull things from it that we want to see in our own world, right? Like,
Yeah,
for sure.
And it's interesting too how fan stuff leaks into the main world. Just like, I think that's also pretty cool though. Of like,
what becomes reality.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably a very good topic of its own. I mean, but like, that's crazy to me though, how it can make such a dent in people. Like, I remember someone saying, oh, I always wish I could draw comics. Now I do. Not like that, but like, just how some people accept something and then they're like, okay, we'll make it.
There was a whole TikTok thing too, where like people would basically be like, on my way to go watch a movie so I can steal my character trait from the main protagonist. You know what I mean? And like, it was just like, oh, that's so funny. It was like, it was like 14-year-old me on my way to watch a movie to steal a character trait from the main protagonist. And I was like, that's fucking hilarious. Cause like, when you're young, you're like, dude, what that guy said was cool. I'm gonna act like that guy. So
yeah.
Facts.
So, like, I think, and if some of us was raised by TV, talking to me. So
yeah, I was raised with a remote control in the back of my tidy whities.
But
joke. Like, I was like, oh, TV.
Like Tommy Pickles over here pulling out.
Yeah, but not diapers. Tidy whities.
That's hilarious. But that'll wrap it up for our deep dive this week. Great conversation on world building, guys, and it really transitions into